This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
This is The Roger Stone Show.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network. Joining me now, Mitch Henk is a veteran of all things media. He's enjoyed 16 years of TV, news, and sports in the South Bend and Green Bay area of Madison, Wisconsin, plus 14 years in talk radio in Madison. Tough market. Like me, he's a recovering political operative, having been a key aide and supporter of Gary Hart's presidential campaign and having worked for the Wisconsin Attorney General and Democrat Jim Doyle. These days, Mitch Henk currently hosts Mitch in the Morning at Oldies 101 WHBU in Anderson, Indiana. But the reason I invited him here today is because Mitch Henk is one of those knowledgeable people in the country when it comes to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. I've debated a number of folks whose views on the assassination are different than mine on Mitch's show, and it occurred to me that Mitch would be a great guy to have on today to talk about the most recent developments pertaining to the murder of John F. Kennedy. Mitch Henk, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Hello, Roger. Thanks for inviting me on. It's a pleasure.
Delighted to have you here. So, as you know, President Donald Trump initially indicated that he would declassify all of the information pertaining to the Kennedy assassination. At the last minute, while he did release about 80% of the remaining classified documents, he held back about 20%. Later said that he did so at the behest of CIA Director Mike Pompeo, who told him that release of those documents might expose the sources and methods of the agency. I asked him directly, Mr. President, what is it? And he says, it's so awful, I can't tell you. Someday you'll know. Just to be clear, he told my good friend Judge Andrew Napolitano the exact same thing. Now, kick the ball back down the road. That decision under the JFK Assassinations Record Act goes to President Joe Biden. He releases a little bit more, but he holds back fundamental documents. Mitch, what do you think they're hiding from us?
Well, they held back the Ruby files, as I understand it, during Trump, and I was surprised by that because we certainly know more about that given recent books about the testimony at the Ruby trial itself, where you had the parking lot attendant or actually manager who heard Ruby on the phone saying, I'll be there, meaning the next day, which was in the garage when he killed Oswald. So, that was in the transcript of testimony in the Ruby trial, which a lot of people didn't see. But, there's so many things about this case that just piqued the interest, and I give you credit as one of the researchers on this and wrote the book when I first interviewed you on the case against LBJ, what motive means an opportunity and a voracious desire to be the president. Why else would he be VP in 1960, give up his majority leader post? He had his sights, but you've also had people that had motive. I believe that rogue Joint Chiefs and rogue CIA, including the former director Alan Dulles, who Kennedy fired of the Bay of Pigs, and others conspired. They had motive. They were angry at him over the Bay of Pigs not doing air cover. They didn't do airstrikes after the pilot was shot. U-2 pilot shot during the missile crisis. People forget that. And then the atmospheric test ban treaty had heavy opposition among hawks in the military complex, industrial complex. So I think there was motive to get rid of. You had anti-Castro Cubans too. You had the likes of David Morales and others who hated Kennedy. They thought he betrayed them. at the Bay of Pigs. So you had all kinds of motive. You had all kinds of people at high places connected. LBJ knew who the allies were. Hoover hated Kennedy. So, yeah, the backdrop, which you did so well in putting together in your book, gives us all the back. And there's so much physical evidence from Dallas. I'll stop now, but you and I both know so many clues on the car where LBJ was not seen, where Lady Bird and Senator Yarborough were waving, and you saw through the glass of the people in the crowd. That's because LBJ was already on the floor. You had that. You had Vicki Adams, who was recorded by the Warren Commission as saying she was on the back staircase at the book depository within 90 seconds of the shooting and was with a coworker and was seen by a supervisor. Her recorded interview is missing from the archives. There's no way Oswald could have been on that back staircase within 90 seconds, which is the time he would have needed to get to the second floor, where he was seen by an officer drinking a Coke and not out of breath. So, I mean, there's so many, and of course the doctors all said there was a grapefruit-sized hole in the back of JFK's head, and that was different from the doctors who observed him at the Bethesda autopsy. So you can see, Roger, what I don't like is the lack of curiosity by the press. The press fell asleep on this case. They were out to lunch. People like Mark Lane and others who questioned the Warren Commission were called crackpots, nutcases. The whole thing is shameful, in my view.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pieces here. Let's unpack it. Jack Ruby, who the Warren Commission said had no known connections to organized crime, is in fact a button man for Carlos Marcello, first in Chicago. Then he goes to Havana to run one of Marcello's casinos, and he ends up at the Carousel Club, a gentleman's club, shall we call it, in Dallas, which was most likely, I believe, owned by Marcello. There is a great video. You can still find it on YouTube. Jack Ruby being led down a hallway in handcuffs by two police officers and reporters, many of whom Jack, of course, knew, saying, Jack, how could this happen? He said, look at the man at the top, the man at the very top. They say, Jack, what are you saying? He says, let me put it to you this way. If Adlai Stevenson had been vice president, none of this would have happened. Whereupon they silence him.
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
So all of that is extraordinarily strange. You list a bunch of the anomalies. What's interesting to me is that even in the Gallup poll a couple of years ago, 63% of Americans still, despite the mainstream media pushing the Warren Commission canard, which at this point is virtually shredded, do not believe that Lee Harvey Oswald, who had no powder burns on his chest or his arms, according to the Dallas Police Department, had acted alone, shot Kennedy, 3 shots, all from the rear. And this recent Paramount Pictures documentary, which features the Parkland doctors, they now come forward and say they saw wounds in Jack Kennedy from the front and the back that were consistent with his being shot from the front and the back. But they were threatened at the time not to discuss it. There's so much here to unpack, you almost don't know where to start.
Well, Robert McClellan, one of the doctors in Trauma Room 1, went on Nova in 1988 and said that Boy Scout patch in the back of the head wasn't there, meaning that he saw a big gaping grapefruit-sized hole in the back of the head, but somehow at the autopsy there was this patch, which gives credence to the theory that the body was altered by surgical means, perhaps at Walter Reed. What's interesting, and you could just see the forensic fact that the body was put in a ceremonial bronze casket in Dallas and then it was retrieved in Bethesda in a red and gray working casket, and his body was in a body bag. That's pretty disturbing, which does give you the idea that the body was altered, which would go to McClellan's observation that patch was new. But obviously there was an effort to make the world know that the shots had come from the rear, when in Dallas, the doctors said the shots had come from the right temple and above the Adam's apple. And Dr. Perry, I believe, Malcolm Perry, was he the doctor in Dallas? He said to a friend years later, a surgeon in Seattle who had always said, hey, was that a rear wound or an exit wound? He didn't want to talk about it, but after a lengthy surgery, when he was very tired, the doctor came at him again and said, was that a exit wound or a entry wound? He said, without question, an entry wound.
All right, folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Mitch Hank, who hosts Mitch in the Morning at WHBU in Anderson, Indiana. And we're talking about the unanswered questions yet today about the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. I'm Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Network, and we'll be right back.
Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
This is the Roger Stone Show.
It is interesting that the night before the motorcade in Fort Worth, LBJ, according to Jacqueline Kennedy's writings, went to Kennedy's suite to try to persuade him to switch so that Senator Yarborough, who was Johnson's archenemy, a progressive Texas Democrat, ride with the president, and that Governor John Connally ride in safety with the vice president, when John Kennedy said it defeated the entire purpose of his trip to Texas, which was to unite the two wings of the party and to be seen with the more conservative Connally, that Johnson pitched a fit and stormed out. When Jackie Kennedy said, what was that all about? President Kennedy said, well, that's just Lyndon being Lyndon.
Yes, and I think there's a broader historical perspective on Vietnam. Kennedy, before he went to Dallas, was sounding off because they had just 3 weeks before the head of South Vietnam, President Diem, and his brother, the head of the Secret Service, Secret Police, were both murdered. Kennedy had supported a coup, but he thought that Diem and his brother should be exiled to a different country. When he had word that they'd been murdered, Kennedy's face changed expressions, and he got up from the table and walked out. It really upset him. And Johnson had been collaborating as vice president with hawks and people that disagreed with Kennedy's policies. He told Mike Mansfield he wanted to come out by 65, be out of Vietnam. That was his goal, but he couldn't do it or Goldwater would kill him. Evelyn Lincoln, who was his personal secretary, told me directly that the weekend of Dallas, she was writing a memo to Mansfield and other friends about his desire to phase out, but couldn't do it until after the election. I knew Evelyn from the Gary Hart campaign where I met her. She came out to be one of my speakers. We had 2 different meals together, and she was a fascinating woman. She also told me that Kennedy told her that he wanted Terry Sanford on the ticket of North Carolina to replace Lyndon Johnson in 1964. I mean, she told me that directly. So, I mean, there was all, and you knew that yourself, so there was all kind of intrigue here. But the political ramifications of Vietnam, and that's huge. And I hate to compare the good ship monkey business to the assassination, but in Matt Bai's book about Gary Hart's demise, Hart told him at his kitchen table, if I'd won, there never would have been a George W. Bush. There never would have been an Iraq war, and the 5,000 people who are dead would be alive. And so that kind of stuff, whether it's a sex scandal or an assassination, history can change.
Well, yes, Evelyn Lincoln, Kennedy's personal secretary, actually on Air Force One, now with Lyndon Johnson as president, makes a list that's in her book of those she suspects of being involved in the murder, and she has the first suspect on that list being Lyndon Johnson himself. The point, of course, is that Johnson was facing two corruption investigations, the Billy Saul Estes investigation and the Bobby Baker investigation. It's interesting that Bobby Baker, who is the Secretary of the U.S. Senate and thought by many to be Johnson's bag man, the man you paid the bribes to, that is fully covered in Robert Caro's multi-volume Pulitzer Prize-winning biography. But go to the index and look up Billy Saul Estes. He's not there. Yet I went and checked, and there's more linear inches coverage of the Saul Estes scandal. Billy Saul Estes being a Texas wheeler dealer who is kicking back to Johnson, and who ultimately goes to prison, and then only after emerging from prison and after Johnson's death insists that he sat in the room where the murder of John F. Kennedy was openly plotted. An interesting side note there. I'm pretty excited about this announcement by President Trump. It's not just that he now says that if elected again, this time he will release all the documents, but that he has asked Robert Kennedy Jr. to head a commission that will study all presidential assassination attempts. Well, that would mean not only could examine the murder of his uncle, President John F. Kennedy, he could examine the murder of his father, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, who had served as Attorney General. He gives a compelling interview with Mike Tyson, of all people, in which he makes the case that Sirhan, the man convicted in that murder, is not, in fact, the killer. He would be allowed to look at the assassination of President Ronald Reagan, for which we have never gotten a full explanation, not even a formal report of the task force headed by Vice President George Bush. And, of course, he could now look at what happened most recently in Butler, Pennsylvania, where every week we seem to get more answers than questions. Most recently hearing that a majority of the people in President Trump's protected detail were not indeed Secret Service agents, but Department of Homeland Security employees who had had a 2-hour online executive protection training video shown to them.
Yeah, that was blatant negligence, and the American people are not satisfied with what happened there. I wonder if this new commissioner, RFK Jr. heads, would look into the Garfield killing, which would clear the Garfield assassin because the doctors killed Garfield with their treatment. So I don't know, I don't know how deep they're going to go. But no, you make great points. You've done great work on this, and I applaud you and the other heavy investigators who have done books on this. I just really am upset with the American press, this conformist, obedient press that didn't question authority, which I thought was the whole basis of the media, to question those in power. So at least you're doing it. Some of us are trying to keep it alive. Hopefully we'll have an answer at some point.
All right, Mitch Hank from Mitch in the Morning over there at WHBU in Anderson, Indiana, an old friend and a knowledgeable fellow. Thanks for joining us on the Roger Stone Show here at the Red Apple Network.
At Arizona State University, we're bringing world-class education from our globally acclaimed faculty to you. Ranked #1 in innovation for 10 consecutive years and #2 among public universities for employability, ASU isn't just ahead of the curve, it's creating new paths to success. Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online, that's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.